good morning. Welcome to Asake Online. My name is Zenzele Ndebele, and this is the Breakfast Club. As usual, every day we bring you different stories, different topics to discuss what's happening. And we'd like to say this month, the Center for Innovation and Technology site is actually focusing on the issue of Gukurahundi Transitional Justice and National Healing. We'll be actually hosting a festival which is called the Asake Film Festival. It starts tomorrow, the 9th of October, and it will run until the 30th of October. So during this month, we'll have a different number of activities that have been lined up. We have, screenings of film festivals. We have a launch site to launch a documentary on the 30th of October. We're also going to launch the Gukurahundi Memorial Library this month, where we'll showcase some of the material that we have gathered and a lot of other things. We also have public lectures that have been lined up, and we'll be talking to various people to actually know or understand a lot more about our history. I think one of the lectures that you should look forward to is a lecture by Stuart Doran. Stuart Doran is an author. He wrote a book called The Kingdom, Power and Glory, and he narrates the history of Zimbabwe from 1960 to 1987. We're also going to have Jeremy Brickhill, and Jeremy will be talking about he'll be doing a lecture, actually a public lecture on the history of ZIPRA, and I think it's one thing to look forward to. Today in my program, I'm talking to Vincent Hillary Ndlovu. Ubabu Ndlovu will be talking about the issue of Super ZAPU and dissidents. I've talked to him for quite a while, and we always have this sort of argument where he says to me, there was nothing called Super ZAPU. And we want to hear from him today so that he can, at least he was there. So he's telling us about something that he knows, and he's not talking about stories. So welcome to the program, Babunjo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ndebele.
Yes, maybe to just start off, just give us a brief background. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Bulilimamangwe district. Some know it as Plumtree, in a place called Tokwana. Ndakazalirwa mukhichi la kuku andizozalirwa musibhedlela andizozalirwa muklinic in the year 1954, being the first born in a family that came up to be 7. I was brought up by my grandmother, as my mother was a teacher, and she was teaching right around the district. So she was never at home most of the time. So I grew up under my grandmother. I started my primary school at Tokwana Primary School in 1961, up to Standard 6 in 1968. We were the last group actually that did Standard 6. After that, they started grade 7. From there, I went to Mzingwane. It was Mzingwane government at that time, but it was during our time that it changed to Mzingwane Secondary. After Mzingwane, I worked in the family business, my uncle's business, Matuaza Enterprises Private Limited, is from 1972. I worked in a number of shops actually around Plumtree, especially in what was then called South Nata. I worked in Uwana, I worked at Kame, Manguba, Nopemano, Mazwaligwe, Nimbuyu store, some call it Sake, up to 1974. In 1974, I left when I was trying to find the greener pastures somewhere. So I went to Bulawayo, and Bulawayo didn't bring me much because I couldn't get employment. Most of my friends who were there were working for the white men and white women as garden boys and sorts. So I was not prepared to do that. So I only had a temporary job with a company called Cotton Printers just for a few weeks. And after that, I left Bulawayo again and went back home to Plumtree. After which, I joined the trek to South Africa, where I worked in Johannesburg doing some manual jobs here and there, like all the boys from Plumtree and around that area. In 1976, that's when I left for the liberation war. I don't want to say the liberation struggle because I was already in the struggle. In South Africa, I was a member of the ANC Zimbabwe, which was led by Bishop Mzorewa at that time. And we had a very strong branch in Santon, actually headed by one Douglas Ndebele. Unfortunately, after we had left for the struggle, he was captured by the apartheid system, and he was never seen again up to this day. So 1976, in October, we left South Africa. It was myself, Council Walinkomo, and Zonke Ngwenya, Lemson Zonke Ngwenya. We left by train to Francistown. And when we got to Francistown, we were taken to the prison. After all the interviews were done and all that was necessary, we were taken to the camp in Francistown. And that was the beginning of the journey to the liberation war.
So when you get there, where are you trained? Do you join ZIPRA or you join Zanda?
From Francistown by plane to Lusaka, from Lusaka to Nampunde. When we got to Nampunde, we were given pseudonyms. And after the initiation, which I've had many people in the interviews calling it Uhlangabezwa Umdala, which was the initiation into ZIPRA, that actually would transform you from a civilian into a soldier, because it was not child's play. I was in a group of 5. It was the late Captain Edwin Budaninleya, Vanish Sbanda, Mika Nkomo from Cholocho, and one, I've forgotten the name. We were selected as a group of 5. And guerrillas around the camp, actually, because they were guerrillas who were already trained, they used to call us Igurubuka Magas Gavi, who was a professor in Osmaland. We were a group that was being, we were given some sort of lectures in politics and doing physical training with others, but we were set apart. But before we left for members, that group was dismantled. We never knew the reasons why the group was dismantled, and we joined the rest and went to train in membership. But there were others of our group who actually joined a group that had come from Tanzania, the group of 800, who were going to the Soviet Union. And we suspected that maybe we were supposed to join that group. I remember Rafael Makwakwa, I remember Price, I remember Rover, who used to be called Faragataki. They joined that group that had come from Tanzania and went to the Soviet Union. We proceeded with our training at membership from October 1976.
When you finish, when are you deployed on the ground?
When we finished the training at membership, I was part of the group that was known as the group of 180 that went to the Soviet Union first. We went to the Soviet Union in May 1977, and we came back at the end of November 1977. When we came back, we opened a new camp where I didn't stay long, actually. I think I was one of the first to leave the camp when I was recalled to FC. After FC, I was deployed in Livingstone in NF1. and the commander there was Todd Mpisi when I got there, who we worked with for quite some time when we were still doing operations, crossing the Zambezi, getting in, doing some operations and going back to Zambia for quite some time. So I worked with Todd Mpisi. Then after that, before John Nyampingiza, Colonel Sipa came, there was an interim commander called Mlobisi Mafuka. Mafuka was his name. He was the first deputy chairman of the National War Veterans Association. So I went with Todd Mpisi as the regional commander. Then after that came Mafuka, and then John Nyampingiza. After some time doing those cross-river operations, which was something that was very daunting, to be honest, and it took some courage to cross the Zambezi so many times, going in and out, in and out. So we had some operations around Victoria Falls, Chambezi, and all those areas along the river. And I also did escort some ex-combatants who were going further inside the country. I would take them to Botswana and then go back to Zambia. Ultimately, I was deployed in Tolocho, where I was from 1978 up to ceasefire in 1979.
In Tolocho, which area were you operating in then?
Tolocho was divided into two sectors. There was the north, which was North Nata, and then there was the other side, this paper area. So I was in North Nata myself, although we overlapped now and again. And we sometimes even went to paper, especially when there were meetings and when it was necessary to be there. But otherwise, mostly I was in North Nata.
I've talked to a number of ZIPRA comrades and who say your group, when it came to ceasefire, your group was not really enthusiastic to go to the assembly points. Why?
That is true, that we're not enthusiastic to go to the assembly points. There were a number of reasons, some of which actually I won't state today, but maybe they'll appear in my book. But the thing is, we had been following, the proceedings at Lancaster House, and besides that, there were a lot of factors actually, some logistical, some administrative, that were not done properly, which made us actually decide to remain in the bush. And I would like to let you know that we didn't remain as disorganized people. We remained as units, as we were. And what further fortified our position was when Margaret Thatcher said the person who was, let me quote what she said. She said, if people think the person who was going to win the elections was the one who was going to rule, they are mistaken. We, meaning the British, were going to look for a reasonable person. And one thing, yes, I've heard people saying we were soldiers, we were supposed to take orders. Yes, that's true. But the people must not rule out the fact that we were political soldiers. And now I've got nothing to apologize about in the situation we are in. That maybe if some of our concerns were listened to, we wouldn't be in this situation. So that is true. Our group didn't go to the assembly points, but we were later punished for that anyway.
In your group, who are some of the people who were in your group?
There are some who are still living who were in our group. There was, unfortunately, Oliver is dead. Oliver Spanda, who was my colleague, or Zenzo, what was his other name. There is Robert Ndlovu, who Jimmy, he's still alive. Patrick Dube, Umakandiwa, I think he later went, but initially we were together, and he was one of our commanders actually. Told him Lolo Umusa was one of our commanders in Cholocho. Yeah, we're 200 actually in all, about 220.
There are about 220 guys who refused to go to assembly points. Later on, ZIPRA sends a group of people to come and, let me use the words, force you to go to assembly points. Tell us about that.
I've heard many stories being told, but I was there. And let me tell you this. When ZIPRA came, it was a battalion that was commanded by somebody whom we trained together. It was a battalion commanded by Zubara Paraza, a Mofadlo from Domodema. And he had quite a number of officers that I had trained with, both in Zambia and in the Soviet Union. And to show that we're not disloyal to the party, and to show that we're not disloyal to ZIPRA, they didn't have to go around looking for us. When we heard from the local population that they were there, and after verifying, using our own means to verify that they were ZIPRA, I personally went there with a unit of 4, and we approached them. After approaching them, we agreed that we were going to organize other combatants to come without causing any rift, after they had told us exactly what they had come for. Unfortunately, I think it was on the 5th day, because after that, I used to go there daily for a briefing, how far we had. Of course, the other side is paper areas, the others were also arranging that. So unfortunately, someone who was then a liaison officer at one brigade came one evening, a day before we were supposed to gather and come. And I don't know what orders were given, because the following day, when I went there, I was sort of captured at gunpoint and disarmed. And the boys that I was with, 2 boys, they panicked because they didn't believe that ZIPRA could do that to us. And they tried to escape, and one was shot. One guy from Rwanda was shot. So we were taken to the police station in Cholocho, and there we found that some of our commanders, Oliver's Banda was there already, and quite a number of guys. So the rest who remained in the bush, at that point, for security reasons, it became very difficult for them to come after they had heard that we had been, one of us had been shot, and we had been arrested, and we have been surrendered to the police. So we were surrendered to the police, and we were detained at Cholocho police station. Well, a lot happened during that time when we were detained, and because all of a sudden, from heroes to villains, and our local population who had worked with during the war, came there. Some wept publicly because of what had happened. Anyway, that is for another day. There are a lot of things that happened around there. So after some time, on the same day, we were taken to Ndlovu police station. And what happened after that, I'm not privy to that, because ultimately all the guys who were in the bush were collected, and they joined us, and we were taken to Kami Maximum Prison, where we were detained.
So actually, ZIPRA detains you.
Yes.
Because the others that you don't want to go to assembly point.
Yes, we are punished for that.
Okay, so now the integration process happens. Why this is important for me is because later on, when people say they are dissidents and all this kind of things, they say, but ZIPRA, called the people who were not wanting to go to assembly points.
Yes, I mean everything. If you look at how history is written, It's written from a false narrative that produced a script that was to tarnish ZIPRA and ZAPU, or to incriminate ZIPRA and ZAPU at every stage. Like you are saying, ZIPRA, ZAPU dealt with their people who had not gone to assembly points, which is us. And we were punished for that. We were taken to maximum prison for 5 months. We were there. And when we were released from Kami maximum prison, we were released to Gwai ZIPRA camp. And there we were also detained. You know, when we left Kami, actually, most of the commanders, the field commanders, were sent to Wawa. So they spent some time in Wawa again before they came to join us at Gwai River Mine. So on that aspect, ZIPRA punished its own, who had not gone to the assembly points.
So now it's time for integration. Where do you go?
I didn't go for integration. I remained at Gwai River Mine waiting to be integrated, but that didn't come until we were taken to Llewellyn Barracks, where we were demobilized in 1981 in December. But there are a lot of things actually surrounding even those periods, which if we can dwell on, we can spend the whole day here. But briefly, from Gwai River Mine, we went to Llewellyn Barracks, where we were demobilized.
Okay, so you are demobilized, you become a civilian, but later on you appear in Botswana. So how do you get to Botswana?
Right, what happened was that after demobilization, we were demobilized in December, and I went to collect my demob first payment in January. When I went for the second payment, before I could even join the queue, a colleague from ZIPRA, his name was Texas Manova, he just came to me and said, if I were you, I wouldn't be here. The CIO are looking for you in connection with, that was in February, in connection with arms that have been found at Ascot Farm. So if I were you, I wouldn't be in this queue, because people have been abducted from this demob queue and disappeared. So from there, I didn't go to Botswana straight. I went to where I lived with my young brother. He's late, unfortunately. His name was Renin Ndlovu in Kwabalanda. So when I got to Kwabalanda, the lady next door was very agitated, and she approached me and said, your friends have been here in a Mazda. They said they would come again and look for you. And I knew that it was not my friends. It was actually the CIO who were looking for me. So I just got into the house and put whatever I had and left. I went to Magwegwe first. I sought refuge in Magwegwe for quite some time. And then when the net was closing down in Magwegwe, I went to Cholocho, which was the last place I had been safe before independence. So I remembered that place and went to Cholocho. And let me tell you, my intention of going to Cholocho was not to go and fight or anything. I was just seeking refuge. But when I got there, I found that there were a lot of ex-combatants who had run away from different places where they had been persecuted, and they were roaming around in Cholocho. Even some who were residents of Cholocho. They've been arrested. Some of them had been captured, and before the 5th Brigade came. So that's when I ended up in Botswana.
So basically now when you are going to Cholocho for the second time, you are now called a dissident.
Let me put this straight, Zenzele. As far as I'm concerned, there were never dissidents in Zimbabwe. At any time, there were survivors of a genocide who had been persecuted while they were in the army and in other arms of government, who decided at a certain stage, after they couldn't take it anymore, to defend themselves because there was no other option. So that's when I went to Toronto for a second time. That's when we were defined as dissidents. But if you look in the dictionary, the definition of dissident, we were not dissident either by definition or by intent. We were survivors of a genocide.
So how many of you are in Cholocho when you get there? How many people do you find there?
The first time we got organized, we were about 7. We met there. We met in the bush. It's not that somebody organized us from somewhere for us to go there. People were running from different places, and we met there. And initially, we were 7. Then, as time went by, you know, combatants were coming from different parts of the country. One particular unit were the boys who had escaped the shooting at 27 in Karoi. They were they had withdrawn with their arms, and they were still deciding what to do and where to go, because they didn't know where to go. If you remember that time, everybody was scattered. You know, there's nobody you could go to say, what do we do? So we ended up being 7, plus those boys from Karoi were 8, and we ended up being 15. Obviously, after we were 15, information was leaking and getting to the security forces and the police. They started hunting for us. And the only option that we had there was to defend ourselves. And that's what we did.
So this is the beginning of the group known as the Dissidents. You're now fighting against the system. So you get to Botswana, and I know for 2 years now, if not 3, we have been talking about this issue of you going to Botswana, because the literature that I read and everyone else is, they say when you get to Botswana, you become involved with Super ZAPU. So did you join Super ZAPU when you go to Botswana?
Let me start by saying what I said again, that there is a narrative that was meant to tarnish ZAPU or ZIPRA. As far as I'm concerned, there was never anything called Super ZAPU. In the same literature that you are talking about, I think it is a book by Peter Steve, who mentions that. But in the same book, page 177, the same Peter Steve, this is what he says, and I'm going to quote: Robert Mugabe was the first to use the term Super ZAPU, which was never used by ZIPRA, nor by operators with operating unit. This is an interview by, with Mugabe by the Tempo magazine. So there are so many contradictions in that book. And who was Peter Steve in the first place? He was a former BSA police. Of course, he's good at writing the history of Southern Africa. But let me tell you, there's nothing that was ever called Super ZAPU, except this word. This term was used by Mugabe as a descriptive term, describing those who were non-conformists, describing those who had decided to defend themselves against his genocide.
So this is the book that you're talking about.
Yes, that's the book I'm talking about. He achieved what he wanted to do, because even today, former ZIPRA is divided on those terms, that there were people who were Super ZAPU. There was nothing like that. I would like to challenge anybody with evidence, written evidence about Super ZAPU, to bring it to you.
So there are 3 characters who are mainly British here, or not British as such, but former Rhodesian guys. There's there's Hoods, there's Matt Calloway, who is Matt Calloway, by the way, used a Moyo guy to deal with to implicate Tabengwa in the arms catches. But then these guys are saying they get to Botswana, their main task was to form a core of disgruntled ZIPRA guys, so that they come back to Zimbabwe, they fight the government, so that ANC is not able to operate from Zimbabwe. So they mentioned this, that no, we then formed the Super ZAPU. They mentioned Tafara, they mentioned Vincent Hillary. Was there a structure that was working with the Boers in Botswana?
If you read that book, Zenzele, still on page 178, it is said there was a proposed structure by somebody called Zenzele Ndebele. I don't even, I've never even heard of that Zenzele Ndebele. So that proposed structure, whoever put it together, I don't know. For whatever reasons, I don't know. But yes, I was in Botswana. I don't deny that. And I met Tafara. Yes, I don't deny that. I met Judea Ndlovu. Yes, I don't deny that. I met Kaiser. I don't deny that. I met Prince Mleya. I don't deny that. I met John. I don't deny that. Yes, I was there. But this structure, which is said to have been a proposed structure by Zenzele Ndebele, it was my first time to see it in this book. And still, in the same book again, on page 136, Peter Steve mentions me as an area commander, whatever that means. So you know, there are a lot of contradictions in this book. In fact, this information is found in Peter Steve's book, Cry Zimbabwe. It's also found in a book called Destructive Engagement, Southern Africa at War by David Martin and Phyllis Johnson. It is also found in Kevin Wood's book, The Kevin Wood Story, although he puts me as Hillary Vincent Ndlovu. So you see, you find that the source of this information, they've got the same source because they are mentioning the same thing. But Zenzele, there's one thing that surprises me. Both Peter Steve and Kevin Woods, who seem to be well versed in this situation, they only mentioned my second deportation from Botswana in December 1983, after which I was indicted and tried and sentenced to 15 years and went to Chikurubi. They don't mention both of them, and this is not coincidence. They don't mention my first deportation in May 1983, when the government tried to use me, and within hours I'd escaped from them.
Yeah, so
no one of them mentions that.
Let's mention this incident. Sometime in 1983, May, if I'm not mistaken, you are deported. You get to Balagwe. You are actually at Balagwe camp. Yes. You know, and how do you get out of Balagwe?
I was taken to Balagwe on my second deportation, not my first. That was my second deportation. How I got out of Balagwe, in fact, I was not taken to Balagwe with any group. I was taken to Balagwe as an individual from Stops camp because I was supposed to go and identify a body of somebody who had been killed, who was said to be a dissident at Mapisa police station. And let me tell you, that was an old man who couldn't have been in the bush at any time. So that's how I got to Mapisa. Then when we got to Mapisa, it was evening. Then I was taken to Balagwe. I was detained in Balagwe for about 4 days and 4 nights. How I got out of Balagwe, I only got it through the members of the CIO who had come to collect me when they were arguing, and also they were not happy about why I was being withdrawn from Balagwe. But according to their argument, it was Kevin Woods who had ordered that I be brought to Bulawayo. But I had never met Kevin Woods myself. So from Balagwe, I was taken to Dunnington camp. That's where I was detained.
Yeah, so there is a story that you were also supposed to go and go to Harare, where you were supposed to be paraded as the leader of the dissidents. Do you know about that?
Yes, I know about that story, but I only heard about that story after I had come back from Harare. Before I went to Harare, there was one leader of the CIO by the name Kuruneri or Mapala. He briefed me that you are going to Harare, so please cooperate as much as you can. I don't know what cooperation he meant. I was not alone. I was with my colleague, John Ndlovu, Kaiser Kumal. So when the day came, 2 CIO officers drove us to Harare, and we were detained at the central police station for the night. Then the following day, we were taken around the police station and even shown the underground cell. In the police station, Central Police Station in Harare, there was an office which when you got into, you would think you are exactly in a ZAPU office. Because there was a ZAPU flag, there was ZAPU paraphernalia in that office. And to my surprise, when I got into that office, the CIO officer, Mapala, whom I had left in Bulawayo, I found him in that office. So he said to me, as I told you, please cooperate as much as you can. Well, we didn't agree on anything. So after that, he took me to another office where there was a white officer. His name, I think, was Morelia or something like that. And he just took me there and surrendered me there and closed the door. So that white officer started interviewing me, interrogating me. He interrogated me, I think, for almost 30 minutes. Then after that, he called a police detail to come and take me. So the police detail came and took me, and I was taken back to the cells.
So then, do you then go to the press conference?
I didn't go to the press conference, and the reason I think why I didn't go to the press conference is that the interrogation that was done by that white officer was a preliminary questioning. And so I think the answers that I gave, he saw that I was going to embarrass the government. So that's why the press conference didn't happen. Because when we came back, what we were told was that we were supposed to be unveiled by the Minister of Security himself, Emerson Mnangagwa. He was supposed to unveil us as the leader of the dissidents at a press conference. That we had after we had come back to Bulawayo, because they were saying, are you back? And why were you not, why didn't the press conference go ahead? I said, no, we didn't know about any press conference ourselves. We were there as prisoners, full stop.
So during this interview, what were they asking you?
This Mr. Morelli, it's 40 years, it's almost 40 years now, but what I still remember, he asked my training, where I trained. He also asked, most of the questions to do with where I operated, where I went to the assembly point. Finally, actually, I think the question he asked was that if you were to be in a public discussion, would you say these things that you were saying here? And I said yes. And that was the end of the interview.
One thing that I also want to find out, at one point during all these things where you're carried from one place to another, you met Colonel Dyke. Do you remember that?
Yes, I met him twice.
Tell us about that. What kind of a person was he?
He was a soldier, a typical soldier. I met Colonel Dyke during my first deportation. Because during my first deportation from Botswana, when we got to Plumtree police station, I was detached from others and taken to a military base. There was a military base in Plumtree, the Plumtree airport. So I was taken there straight away and put on a spotter plane to one brigade on my own. The rest that we were deported together from Botswana, because most ex-Zipra were actually rounded up in Botswana and deported together with us. So when we got to Plumtree, I was detached from the rest and taken to the airport, put on a spotter plane to one brigade. We got to one brigade, and when we got to one brigade, I was taken to Stops camp. I slept at Stops camp, and the following morning I was driven back to one brigade. When I was driven back to one brigade, that's when I realized that the government wanted to use me. What happened is that when I got to one brigade the second day, that's when I met Colonel Dyke. I was not told anything. Nobody briefed me about anything because I was a prisoner with leg irons, with handcuffs. So Colonel Dyke takes me in a helicopter. I didn't know where we were going, but I later found out that we are going to Sanyetsen mine, new mine in Matopo. Right? There's something I want to mention here. While we were crossing the Matopo National Park, it was the two of us in the helicopter. Colonel Dyke says to me, do you know that I can push you down into the mountains? And then it will be my word. I'll just say, you escaped. I looked at him and I laughed. I was in leg irons, I was in handcuffs, but I looked at him and I smiled. I think that confused him. Anyway, but to be honest with you, let me tell you, at that point, I was prepared to go down with him in the helicopter if he had tried to do that. But anyway, that is for another day. So we got to Sanyetsen mine. When we got to Sanyetsen mine, the para battalion, a unit of the parachute battalion was based there. So we landed there in our helicopter. I didn't know what was going on. So we got there. I was limping because the other night they had taken me to somewhere in Siwubu in Plumtree during the night, and on a wild goose chase where it was said we were looking for the tourists. It's a long story anyway. So my feet were swelling, and because I had no shoes, and we traversed that terrain with me without shoes. So we got to Sanyetsen mine. Then we got there. I was taken out of the helicopter to the camp headquarters. I was left there being guarded by a pair of soldiers while Colonel Dyke was briefing the commander, I think, of the camp about what he thought I should be doing. In the meantime, Dyke was thinking that he was going to make me join the Cello Scouts who were part of the para battalion. Me joining the Cello Scouts, I think he had miscalculated. He hadn't even thought about who I was and what drove me. So I was there for the night, and there was the center of attraction with guys from the para coming to view me as if I was in the zoo, some asking me questions, but some, you could tell in their faces that they were sympathizing. They didn't understand. They didn't like what was going on. Especially some former Zipra guys, I knew. Because I had foreign bodies in my legs, and one of the guys actually had to take those foreign bodies, and I was bandaged and all that. Then the second night, I saw a group of solo scouts who were wearing the combat uniforms that we used to wear during the struggle, coming into the camp, carrying AK rifles and all the Eastern Bloc rifles. They were just exactly as what we were when we were in the bush. I saw them coming into the camp. They came, they got into a tent, they changed into the army uniform. And they came to greet me. Immediately they came out of the tent, they all lined up to come where I was, because I think they had been told. So they came there, they greeted me. Some mocked me as much as they wanted to mock me, and but again, some you could tell that they didn't like what was happening. So on the third night, my swelling feet were a bit better, and even my hands from the handcuffs were even better. So I am briefed that what they wanted me to do was to, they would take me out, and together with the clandestine forces, so that if I could help them catch what they called the dissidents, what I call the survivors, one or two of them, I would be rewarded. So around, that was on the fourth night. It was, I remember, it was on the 30th of June, 1983. Yes, on the 30th of June, we left with those guys wearing those clandestine uniforms as if they were dissidents themselves. So we went to a village in around. We were driven actually by a vehicle to a village somewhere around Mambale. So we got there in the morning. I was briefed what to do. That what I would do, I would entice any dissidents if we hear of any, and then if they are caught or killed, I would be rewarded for that. So when we got to Mambale, first thing in the morning, we met one old man who was looking for his goats. So we talked to him, and I'm the one who asked him questions. And we heard that there's some armed people who were seen the previous day around that area. When we were deployed, there was a unit of the para battalion that was deployed on a mountain, on an observation point, who would, when they see any movement, would communicate with this fenced unit I was in, so that we could attack or approach those armed people. So I was with them the first day. Then the second day, we got to Beula school, and the guys were drunk. There was a Pelanda bus that had come and it had brought beer from town. So the guys got the beer from there, and they got so drunk, and I escaped. I escaped on the 30th during the night, and by the first, I was a free man.
So you escape, you go back to Botswana.
Yes.
Then,
but first I didn't go back to Botswana. First, I looked for some other survivors who were there around the country, around Matabele and South, and found them. Because they had given me a gun without a firing pin. They thought I was stupid. I would try to fire at them so that they would kill me like a dog.
fortunately, you noticed that your gun had no firing pin. So even if you had an encounter with the dissidents, you were not going to be able to fire at them.
I didn't actually find out. I was very much suspicious that these guys could give me a functioning a functioning gun. So I explored the gun and found that it had no firing pin, although I had 4 full magazines of ammunition.
So now for the first escape, you now have a gun with ammunition. So you are a happy man.
But it doesn't have a firing pin.
So it's as good as useless.
It is as good as I don't have any gun.
So you go back to Botswana. You then you get deported for the second time.
Yes.
You're very unlucky. But then, so you come for the second time, you are sentenced.
Yes, I was deported for the second time in December. I was arrested actually for a minor crime. It was driving without driving using a learner's license without somebody accompanying me. That's how it started. But unfortunately, when I got to the police camp, I found that some of my colleagues who were in Francistown had also been rounded up. So we were deported for the second time. And for the second time, because what used to happen was that the Botswana Defense Force would take us from Botswana up to the border and then surrender us to the Zimbabwe Defense Force. So for the second time, when we came, I remember there was a CIO guy who called himself Jesus from Gwanda in Plumtree. Straight away, he detached me from the others, and they took me in the Land Rover, and I was chained to the dashboard of the car. And he just told me that this time we are not letting you go. This time we are going to make sure that you pay for what you have done. So I was taken to Plumtree Police Station. This time we were driven to Stops Camp. And yeah, we were in Stops Camp for quite some time. And at one time I was detained at Dunnington again. At one time I was detained at... I was actually being shunted in the police stations around Bulawayo. Yeah, up to a time I was taken to Kame prison, where I was detained initially. When the detention order expired, that's when the CID came and took me, and then they took a warrant and question statement. After that, I went to court, where I was sentenced to 15 years. After initially, my case was presided over by Magistrate McCarthy, and then McCarthy resigned during the course of my case, and then Emaktovich took over, and I was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment.
So you stay in prison till the unit accord?
Yes, 4 years in Kami maximum prison in a single cell, and then the other 3 years in Chikurubi. So a total of 7 years out of 15. But then the unit accord was signed in 1987, and the government forces that had been arrested during that period were released in 1988. But it took 2 more or 3 more years, because we were released on the 3rd of September 1990.
So that's like 3 years after the unit accord?
Yes.
Was there any explanation why you were not being released?
There was no explanation, and there's no one who ever came to, even from the political side, to come and even brief us of what was going on. The people who actually fought our case for us to be released was the Ruth Tinamano, Judith Todd, and Byron Elliott, a lawyer with Scanlon and Holderness. They were fighting our case together with Amnesty International. Otherwise, we were just left in prison.
You have a very interesting story, and I'm happy that you finally we have this chat. We've been talking for quite a while, and I mean, there will always be, you know, these narratives. This is about 30 years ago, so the narratives will always be different. But maybe as we conclude this program, you are talking about you are writing a book. So when can we expect this book?
Well, I don't want to speculate, but it will be out anytime.
Yeah. So someone has a question here for people who are watching the program. I mean, they have a question, and the question is, what do you make of the unit accord of 1987, especially looking at the power of ZAPU in this unit accord?
Well, the unit accord was all about stopping people being killed, to be honest. I mean, there was nothing much in it, and also it stabilized the situation to an extent, because if you look at it, if you go back in history, it was after the unity accord that even civil society started working again. It was after the unity accord that even the likes of the MDC were formed. So the unity accord stabilized, to an extent, it stabilized the situation.
You know, I already seen people giving a title. Someone here says maybe your book should be called a rifle with no pin. You know, so, there has been story. You know, you have given us one interesting story. Yes. Of the fact that the system, we had pseudo dissidents. People were pretending to be dissidents. You know, but those who were real, I mean, I'll use the real in quotes, who were, you know, the survivors, what you call, but which the system called dissidents. I mean, do you have estimates how many they were at their peak?
Before I was arrested, actually, before I was deported, I was arrested by Botswana and deported in December 1983. I should think we were not more than 300. We were never more than 300 at any time, anyway. You see, the problem that was there was that at times the government was acting on false information that they were given by the CIO. I remember in 1982, the CIO guy who was in Matabele North, actually, he released a statement in a pamphlet called Facts and Opinions, that there were 1,200 Zipra who had crossed the river from Zambia, which was nonsense. You know, and actually the government would act on that information, which was nonsense. And let me emphasize this again, Zenzele, that there was nobody who ever organized people to go into the bush. People were running away from persecution from different parts of the country, and we found ourselves there. And you know, when we were hunted down, we were given no option, because the ZAPU leadership was scattered, some were in prison, some were in hiding. So you know, there was nobody to go to. So we decided to defend ourselves.
So you never at one point got any material or political support from ZAPU?
No, not at all. No. Unless you mean ZAPU as people in the rural areas who had no option because we were armed like anybody else. But otherwise, to be honest with you, all this false narrative of trying to incriminate ZAPU, that ZAPU sponsored dissidents, that's rubbish. That it was a question of people defending themselves, individuals who had been persecuted. Well, we were ZAPU and ZIPRA by association, but this was one man for himself, and we had to collectively defend ourselves, and that I'm not apologetic.
Did you ever get any material support from apartheid South Africa?
Yes, we got. Let me say this. I've heard people trying to make this an ideological thing. Let me ask you a question, or even if there are listeners. You are in your home, you are a father or a brother. Your mother is killed, your sister is raped, your wife is robbed in front of you. You escape, right? You escape, and the only person who is offering something to help yourself is the neighbor you are not on taking terms. What do you do? With a black mamba in the house, killing everybody.
That's quite an interesting narrative, because I mean that basically means that you are saying you were left with no choice but to get the help from those who were willing to help.
This had nothing to do with ideology. After 1980, it was a question of power. It was a question of power and annihilating ZAPU and ZIPRA, full stop. All these people want to bring ideology into this. I don't know what they think. For instance, I'm talking about these young boys who were from a 27 battalion, who had actually survived the shootout, and the boys from Slovenia who had survived the shootout, the boys from 4 Brigade who had survived the shootout. Did you want them to go back and grovel and say we have come back? Would they have survived? Anybody who thinks they should have gone back and said, oh, we have come back, we had made a mistake, should have his or her head examined.
Yeah, you really bring interesting points, and you're actually making these things clearer to people who, I mean, we were young then, we didn't understand what was going on, and probably this is why 36 years later we are trying to trace our steps to get them from the people who were there, because the sad story about this issue is that we have never heard from people like you. So we are glad that we get the opportunity to actually listen to people who were there telling us what had happened, because for so many years it was the government's narrative. And finally, we get to hear from your side of the story.
Right. Zenzele, if you go to Peter Steve's book, page 210, you find that there is, and it was Emerson Mnangagwa who is president now, who mentioned that some people who were captured were UNC members, but that is never mentioned. Some of the so-called dissidents who were captured were UNC members. In that same book, you know, and that is never mentioned. The narrative from the beginning was to tarnish ZAPU. The narrative from the beginning was to annihilate ZAPU. You know, ZAPU and ZIPRA were very unfortunate because we had a government here we thought were allies that was against us. We had the apartheid government that was against us. Everybody was against ZIPRA at that time.
Yeah, the last question before we leave a bit, someone is saying you were at the Guai River mine. Did you see any stashing of, did you see any hiding of the arms catch that people were talking about? Was
no,
there
no, 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 no. It actually, it's here with the summary of the story because I was expelled from Guai River mine, and they are living witnesses to that. I was not only at Guai River mine, I was at Ntumbane, both first and second in Ntumbane. So it's a long story that needs maybe a number of days. So I had no way of seeing any hiding of arms, and I don't believe in that anyway.
Yeah. So it's well, I think for today let's leave it here. But when we do interact for the second time, I think I'll be interested in us talking about the Ntumbane 1, the Ntumbane 2. You have a story to tell, and I really hope, like many other guys have said here, we really encourage you to write this book or tell the story so that the generations to come will be able to read what has happened. And I have respect for you because you are telling us as it is. Many people try to rewrite the history, but you have told us exactly like it happened. And Ndobo katate Ndlovu.
Hayi, kwakalulwa.
Abantu basekulu, so at least basekulu banobuza abazekulu ukuthi kwakanta chini ukuthi tongo wisisa ukuthi kati hangwe imile chini.
Hayi kobukeka kwazo. Kobukeka kwazo kwazo. But maybe before you conclude, I would like to say something about my own people. Well, if I say my own people, I mean the narrative that took place after independence, where politics was regionalized. You know, we are easily defined by those who are our detractors. I don't know why. Why people from our region who were persecuted ended up, acceding or allowing themselves to call their own dissidents. I don't understand, to be honest with you. That is allowing to be defined by other people. And if we think we are going to go anywhere by doing that, I'm sorry. We are not going anywhere.
That's a powerful statement that you're saying. When you're saying we are easily defined by our detractors. And I think the MDC it will ring bells to them because they've been called names by those who want them out, and mainly people would take that tag. So without wasting your time, thank you very much for giving us almost an hour or so talking about this. And I can assure you this will not be the last, but we have a lot to talk about. We have a lot to learn. This was the Breakfast Club, and today I was talking to Baba Vincent Hillary Ndlovu, and I think for the last 2 years we've been talking on and off, and I really appreciate that today we have had an hour to discuss about this issue. And I can assure you that I'm looking forward to your book, and it will give us more space and more narratives and more views on what happened in the early 80s, because the history of Zimbabwe has been written by people who are not honest, and there are a lot of truths that we've been told about the early years of our independence. No wonder why today we still have so many things that are not going right, and we still have struggling with unity, peace, and reconciliation almost 40 years after independence. This was the Breakfast Club. My name is Zenzele Ndebele. Till we meet again in other programs, have a good day.